prisons must be made tougher, say the government. It's the only language that criminals understand. But this man says they're wrong. He's just finished a life sentence for murder. And what changed him, he says, was the most liberal prison in Britain. Hugh Collins is leaving jail. At 42, he knows the prison system better than most. He spent over half his life inside. Now, after serving 16 years for murder, he says he's out for good.
Oh, I feel high. I mean, it's been 16 years. It's been a long time. I feel a bit sad for guys that's still in there. But it's just great to be it, you know, and I don't feel any malice towards the system or anybody else. No, it's over. I've done the sentence. As I say, I just want to get on with my life now.
For Hugh Collins' mother, his release brings mixed emotions.
I was very surprised. I felt very, very sad. When Hugh came out that morning, I was overcome with sadness, actually. Sadness for him, sadness for the people he was leaving behind in there, sadness in particular for the mother whose son he had killed, and for all the grief that had been caused, for all the grief that was packed into that, his life.
Hugh Collins' life has had a lot packed into it, not much of it good. He was a violent criminal, a member of one of Glasgow's most notorious gangs, and a killer who didn't hesitate to use a knife. But from today, he wants to be known as an artist and sculptor.
I knew the moment I killed him with the very first blow, because it was a long knife, it was a Bowie knife, quite a long blade on it. It was about 10 inches or something, 12 inches. And my knuckles hit his jacket, you know, so I knew the blade had went right through him. And that's when I just flipped.
Among the family and friends celebrating Hugh Collins' release is a leading Scottish artist, Caroline McNairn. She and Collins met 3 years ago. Now they are married.
When I first met Hugh, he's told me about his past. And he told me in a very intimate setting that, with my parents, of course, you know, the worst thing on earth is to go home and say, this is the man I'm very seriously involved with. There is a thing, you know, that the very fact of murder, I mean, it's one act that has taken place, and yet it changes the whole exterior view of the person. I mean, I still see, even in a casual sense, I still see people looking at Hugh and going, he's a murderer. It's quite simple. He's not like a human being or things like that, but it's like a huge image which will always go in front of him, and it's something that both of us have to deal with.
Caroline's way of dealing with Hugh is direct. On his release, she took him to the newspaper archives so they could face up to his violent past together.
He was very nervous when I took him to the library. It was a strange experience for me to sit there and look at these headlines, because I didn't imagine it would be front page news. So it was a very emotional moment when we actually found, you know, the cover stories in the Glasgow Herald and things, and it also brought in the other voice which I needed, somebody else's viewpoint.
Glasgow died from a 10-inch knife went through the heart outside the Luna 7 pub in the Glasgow city centre on April the 9th.
For him to find the headlines, I think it was quite difficult, because it told a story completely different from how he'd remembered it. The picture on the front of the Glasgow Herald did not involve him. In fact, his name wasn't mentioned till further down the newspaper report, so that what was such a big event for him I think he saw involved a whole range of other people, you know, the victim, the victim's wife. And that's important for him, coming out into a society where it's not just his life that's important here, there's a whole range of other people's. What does it seem like, looking at it now?
Seems 1,000 miles away. It's like reading about somebody else. And I just don't see any sense to any of it.
Hugh Collins killed his victim, Willie Mooney, in 1977. Stabbings and slashings were commonplace in Glasgow and were nothing new. 25 years before, Collins' own father had received what was then a record sentence for slashing a dance hall manager with a razor.
This is the first time I've saw this. This is my father, 10-year sentence on Glasgow razor slasher. Collins, who had on his left cheek a deep scar, took the sentence stolidly. Before descending to the cells, he took a quick look round the court, apparently seeking a glimpse of his young wife. She had been persuaded, however, to remain outside the court during the final proceedings. When informed of the sentence in the corridor of the court, she burst into tears and was led away weeping. It's strange looking at it because I've never imagined my father as a 22-year-old, and I've never heard him described as a married couple with a baby. So it's a bit, I feel quite sorry for both of them, you know, because I've experienced a similar feelings where he's putting on this front. He took the sentence stolidly, you know. That's just bravado, and then my ma's left in tears, you know. And what's actually happened there is that my mother's been sentenced to 10 years as well, you know, and it affected me. That's the way I look at this.
When he was hardly a baby, his father got quite a long prison sentence. He grew up hero worshipping his father. Sort of feeling that his father was some sort of martyr. And I think he had a chip on his shoulder about that.
As Collins grew older, he too was drawn into crime. At the age of 16, he served his first sentence. He was already a member of the Shamrocks, one of the many Glasgow razor gangs of the late 60s.
At that time, there were 44 known gangs in Glasgow. The members of these gangs ranged from, at the top end, 750 to the bottom end, about 40. The main weapon was just a cutthroat razor, or they would carry a knife of different degrees. These were violent days, and these were particularly nasty people to deal with.
Violence became more savage and more unpredictable with the arrival of drugs on the gang scene.
There was a lot of serious drugs, LSD, heroin, everything was available, and I was still carrying weapons. I was always scared. You know, you're waiting for somebody coming up. I mean, I've got this scar here. I got caught one night just off guard, stoned on drugs, and he got me with a butcher's cleaver and an oak razor. Just nipped me and then bolted. You know, and after that I would never go on the streets without a weapon.
I think he just went about in a haze of drink and drugs and gangs, and I mean, he used to bore me to tears when he'd come to see me, and I mean, it was always about prison talk, you know, which I found pretty boring. And I just really couldn't be bothered with him, and I told him at that time if that was the way he wanted to live, he was more than welcome to do it. Something was bound to happen. Something was just round the corner waiting to happen. And it was just a matter of whether he was going to be the victim or the perpetrator.
For both perpetrator and victim, life changed fundamentally 16 years ago in this pub, then known as the Luna 7. Collins was expecting trouble from others in the bar. But when a fight started involving Mooney, Collins jumped in.
There was a serious confrontation going to happen. But I savaged the guy, really savaged him, and I never meant to do it. I think the pressure through the fight with these other guys erupted on Willie Mooney, and I went overboard. Mooney's came towards me, I've just sort of banged him with this knife, and the guy that was on my side sort of thing, he's grabbed me and says, "You've done him, just walk away." I could have walked straight out the pub and I'd never have been done for it, but I went berserk, just really went berserk on this guy, and he had a blade on him but he couldn't get it out in time, and I stabbed him about 4 or 5 times, I'm not sure, but I went into a frenzy on the guy. We fought for about a couple of minutes I think. He got on top of me at one point, smashed a tumbler against the side of my head, and I've lunged upwards with the knife, and that's what killed him I think. Then he stood up, walked up the street a bit, come back down and slid down in front of me, and that's when it really hit me that I'd actually killed him.
Well, I remember when we arrived that Mooney was lying dead in the street, so we sealed off the premises, obtained police transport and removed 51 customers from the public house down to the central police station. And as a result of that and other information, suspicion fell on one Hugh Collins.
Collins was convicted of the murder of Willie Mooney. In July 1977, he began a life sentence in Perth Prison.
I'm looking at Perth Prison and I feel quite strange. 16 years ago I went there, and I always fantasised about actually being released and looking into a prison, you know, and here I'm standing looking into Perth Prison. I mean, I was in shock with the life sentence, but also I wasn't over the shock that I'd killed a guy, and you're thrown straight into the sort of everyday routine, you know, after killing somebody. I think there should be a long period of observation till you come to terms with that.
In starting a life sentence, Collins was also embarking on a new cycle of violence.
Felt a lot of resentment building up, quite a lot of anger. I think the authorities imagine that because you've been sentenced to life that that's you finished, it's all over sort of a thing. With me it was the opposite. I just said, well, I've got no restraints on me whatsoever. If I get any messing about, I won't take it out in prisoners. I'll turn on the staff. Half the jail knew what I was planning. But I'd reached a stage where I just didn't care, and I was going to take it out in one staff for as many as possible. So I went across to the surgery and stabbed 3 of them. I don't want to get into details, it was that long ago, but I really savaged the 3 of them, and I enjoyed it. Enjoyed every minute of it.
For these stabbings, Hugh Collins was sentenced to a further 7 years on top of his life sentence. He claims he was also beaten repeatedly by prison officers.
Staff beat me up twice a day for 5 days solid, and I mean beat up. I was covered in boot polish, cuts. My body was swollen about twice its normal size. I was fed mice, spitting in my food, the whole thing. If I could have got my hands on any screw in the jail, I would have murdered them.
But the days of Hugh Collins' violence were about to end. They would be stopped not by force, but by reason. Collins was transferred to the most liberal prison regime in Britain, the special unit at Glasgow's Barlinnie Prison. This footage shows the special unit at the time that Collins was held there. It had been set up in the early 70s under a Conservative government. Following the abolition of capital punishment, there had been concern at the increasing numbers of violent prisoners in Scotland's jails.
The prisons were concerned about a build-up of long-sentence prisoners who had little to lose by being in the prison system. The traditional methods of the prison service were to continually tighten up and tighten up. And I think what was unusual and special about the special unit is we said suddenly, let's make it open. We've got a very secure environment, and let's see how open we can make it within that and pass responsibility back to prisoners rather than taking it away from them. And that includes taking risks. If you don't take risks, you don't rehabilitate people.
Knives and other potential weapons are all around. But in 20 years, the unit has been almost free of violence.
The special unit in Barlinnie is the only place that I've been in that actually tackled me and helped me. Since I went to the unit, I've been involved in one assault, and that's 14 years, 15 years, which is quite a good record, considering that the previous years I'd assaults nearly every day of the week.
The special unit doesn't achieve its results cheaply. Prisoners' cells are made as much like home as possible, and they can enjoy unsupervised visits in them at any time.
The actual cell, with a TV, the stereo equipment, the carpet, all the rubbish gave me the horrors. I was more comfortable in a cell with nothing in it, because then I knew I was doing time. So to deal with the fact that I was marking time in a lot of ways, and that these things could actually educate me in a lot of ways. But the visits, they're vital to people, vital to the families, especially guys who've got kids. You can maintain relationships where you've got unlimited access to the people that you love. I mean, my father was sentenced to 10 years and it ended up in a divorce. If they'd been allowed a place like the special unit, I might have had a different life.
Responsibility for changing their behaviour is thrown back on the inmates themselves. They're answerable not only to the staff, but to each other.
I found the special unit quite difficult because it confronted me with myself. I didn't like to admit that I had problems. But I mean, you've got real people that are just coming straight in and pulling you up about something. So if I'd still been in the sort of state of fear that grew into adulthood, I would probably have used a weapon on somebody. But they allowed me to be myself in there, actually be myself. No Hugh Collins, the violent person, or Hugh Collins, the lifer, any of this kind of thing, or Hugh Collins, the gang member. It was just a guy. I was allowed to be myself there.
The unit measures its success in long-term savings. Violence is 50 times less likely than in ordinary prisons, and inmates are only half as likely to re-offend. But in today's short-term financial climate, its future is in doubt.
We have to deliver value for money. It's costing much more to keep a person in a special unit than it is in the mainstream. We have 8 people at the Barlinnie Special Unit. We have almost 6,000 prisons elsewhere. We have to decide if devoting so much extra in the way of resources can be justified.
If I was a taxpayer, I would want to know if prison was going to be an investment, if somebody was going to be rehabilitated. The special unit doesn't rehabilitate people. What it does do is it re-socialises people. You know, I didn't have any values of any kind until I went to the unit. And it exposed me to my family, to different people in life. Also people in the community who were affected by me.
In his time at the special unit, Hugh Collins' life was turned around. A violent personality became an artistic one.
My memory is of this young man coming in, being almost punch drunk, in the sense he was confused, he was suspicious. And one day I went into his cell. He had done a drawing, a very fine line drawing of Christ on the cross. You know, it was a very interesting drawing. The next time I went back into his cell, he'd slashed it with a knife or a razor. And there was quite a gap after that. And then he just went on painting and drawing, and then began to sculpt.
And the results of his sculpting were astonishing. For 2 years in the special unit, Collins attacked a 9-ton block of stone to produce a full-size statue, Christ and the Sinner.
The motivation behind it was guilt. I don't even know if Jesus Christ existed, to be honest with you. But what it did do, it helped me to come to terms with the idea that I did kill a person. That's why this statue is unbearable to me at times, because I see the guilt that I went through. It's a very, very sad piece of work. I can see the flaws in it, I can see the mistakes in it, but with the motivation behind it, I think that's where the success lies, because it became a turning point.
I think there are links between the energy of violence and the energy of creativity. And it's the energy that so many of these prisoners have, because they've got intelligence, they've got energy, they've got skill, but it's all been going on to destructive behaviour, which is a menace to all of us in society. And I reckon if you can just channel that energy into creative use, not only do the prisoners benefit, but you get interesting art, and hopefully society benefits.
It was marvellous to see the change in him. Don't get me wrong, there were times when, I mean, it was a long, long road, and there was quite a few pitfalls, but nevertheless, even the sort of mistakes that he did make after that, if you could call them mistakes, but the wee slip-ups weren't never quite as bad as they had been before he went to the special unit.
My sympathies lie with the relatives of the person who was murdered. What might he have become? Other officers I've spoken to say, knowing Mooney, he wouldn't have come to anything. And I say, well, he never got the chance.
Hugh Collins believes that he has now mastered his own aggression.
I don't believe that violence is biological, you're born violent. I think that's just a lot of nonsense. I wouldn't describe myself as a killer. I didn't try to kill him. It was just something that erupted inside me. But since then, I've really examined myself, and I've come to terms with the fact that I've killed a guy, but I've got to get on with my life, you know, and I really don't think I would never lift a weapon again in any situation.
But Collins is finding that life outside has changed radically in the 16 years he's been away. The old-style gangs have gone, but unemployment and an influx of hard drugs have made parts of Glasgow even more dangerous. Collins used a knife, but today young criminals are carrying guns.
They're reckless, totally reckless. It's just the situation that I see, and I can understand them, I can relate to them. And I mean, I've nearly came unstuck a few times since I've been released. I was offered a contract in Glasgow, 20 grand, supposed to be a favour to shoot a guy, quick money. But I don't want involved. But young kids these days have got absolutely nothing, no future whatsoever. And it must be really frightening for them, you know. And the anger, I can only imagine how they feel. The only future for kids in Glasgow that I see is prison.
This may be that more people will go to prison. I don't flinch from that. We shall no longer judge the success of our system of justice by a fall in our prison population. Let's be clear. Prison works. It ensures that we are protected from murderers, muggers, and rapists, and it makes many who are tempted to commit crime think twice.
The government position on prison reform is voiced by the Home Secretary. Life inside, he says, must get harder.
Decent but austere.
Well, obviously it's a Victorian attitude that just doesn't work. You know, I've been in some hard prisons, and it doesn't tackle the problem, doesn't come into contact with the problem. There is a problem with crime in society, but prison won't resolve that. It'll only make it worse. A harder regime or an austere prison will aggravate the situation, will aggravate individuals. It'll make guys worse. They'll be more angry, a lot more damaged than before they went in. And as I say, it'll never come into contact with the cause of crime or the cause of violence.